When you're heading to Disney, one of the biggest decisions is, should I stay on property or off property? There are tons of opinions and ideas out there, but I'm sharing why my family of 8 decided to stay off property for our Disney trip. In this video, I'll discuss why we chose to stay off property, along with those pros and cons of staying on property or off property to help you decide what's right for your family. And then I will share how it was for my family. Would we do anything different, or did we make the right choice? Let's dive in. When you're deciding to stay on or off property, the biggest factor is likely price, but there are plenty of other pros and cons. I probably planned like 10 different vacations to see what would be right for my family. I've got a couple different categories to consider for staying on property versus off property. The first is early entry. When you stay on property, you get the bonus of early entry for different theme parks. It's like 30 minutes at different parks, or maybe staying late. If you're staying at a deluxe park, they're open later. However, you do not get that when you're staying off property. So pro for on property, con for off property. The other thing to consider is transportation. When you stay on Disney property, you've got transportation. It can vary depending on the hotel, but there's the Disney buses, there's the Skyliner, the boats, the monorail, depending on which hotel you choose. There's transportation. You don't need to rent a car. Off property, you do. You have to find a way to get to the park. So you're either having to Uber every day or use rideshare every day or rent a vehicle, which is an added cost. When I went for my honeymoon to Disney, there were magic buses that took you from the airport to Disney and you didn't have to rent a car. That isn't something that is right now. At the time of filming, it is January of 2024 and we went in September of 2023. So we would have to get to the hotel either way, or to the airBNB either way. So that was something to consider, not just getting to, renting a car to drive around, but renting a car to get, or using something to get to your hotel. The next kind of big area that is up for debate when considering on property or off property is, do you want to leave the Disney bubble? There is something so magical when you drive through the gates of Disney World that you are in Disney, and there is a feeling and a magic that unbeatable. So staying on property, you don't leave that Disney bubble. Even if you're staying at a hotel that isn't highly Disney themed, you're still in the bubble. And so that is definitely a perk. When you stay off property, you leave the Disney bubble. You have to leave and come from that Disney bubble. You are outside of it. Another thing about staying on property is they're typically a hotel room, so you don't have to worry about keeping things cleaned up, following airBNB rules. Obviously, you want to be a good guest on property, but at the airBNB, you need to pick up and do dishes and do things like that. Which brings me to the next point. When you're staying off property, there is a kitchen. Now, there are small kitchenettes in some of the rooms, or maybe even full kitchens in some of the bigger suites, but those will definitely cost significantly more staying on property versus off property. Staying on property fitting into that, you might feel a little bit more home staying on property because you're relaxing. You're not in a house in kind of mom mode per se, whereas you're still in a home, running a home on vacation at off property if you're staying at an airBNB. Moving into that, we did talk about transportation, getting around the parks, getting to the parks, but renting a car, you do need to pay for parking to get to the parks, and you don't have to worry about that staying on property. So you can kind of decide, again, do you want to, is that cost of parking offset? Is it better to not pay for parking and not deal with transportation? That was something. Now, another thing about transportation to think about is the stroller. Do you have a stroller? Are you going to have to break it down to get onto that bus? Which led into part of my decisions why we picked everything. We'll get there. The other thing about staying on property is it's a hotel room. While some of them have 1 bedroom, maybe at the biggest, again, if you're really splurging and going for a multiple bedroom, you're in one space together. And after a long day at the parks, and maybe you want to put down a baby for a nap, or you want to do this or that, you're all in that space together instead of in a home where you might have different rooms. So you could kind of put the kids down and just kind of decompress as adults without the kids. That is a little harder to do on property versus off property. I'm going to share my story, my experience, what our family did, so you can kind of think about these things and how it might apply for your family. Now, the biggest thing for my family for staying off property was saving money, but it wasn't even just that. My family, we have 6 kids. we would need to stay in 2 rooms unless we were getting a very, very expensive suite in those bigger ones, and that wasn't in our budget or something that we wanted to spend the money on. We would have had to we were looking at 2 rooms at something like one of the all-star resorts, or even the moderate, like the Coronado or Caribbean Beach. But again, we would need 2 rooms, and my parents and my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law and my brother would also need to book a room. That's more money that would be spent on this trip, where we could all combine and go into a house that had quite a few bedrooms and be a space to stay. There were several perks for staying off property. So for us, because we could all be in that same space, my husband and I were able to leave the kids with the grandparents one night, go back to the parks and have a date night. It would be much more complicated if we had 3 different rooms that we needed to have kids in and have people watching them. So that was a very big perk, being able to do that. Another thing is that because we have such a wide range in ages, but we still had a baby that was sleeping, and while we bring the slumber pod to keep her, a nice little tent thing, to keep her area dark and quiet, if we had to set it up and then all sit in it, whenever we came home back from the parks, we would need to be so quiet and just kind of tiptoeing and worrying about waking her, because sleep is so important to our family. So, and you know, when the baby sleeps well, mommy sleeps well. That was a big, big factor for our family, for being able to have more spaces, more rooms, instead of just all being into one spot. And if a kid woke up early, that they wouldn't wake everybody else up because we were in a home instead of one room. The other detail that was actually kind of important was that we had a stroller. Renting a car for us meant we could pack up the stroller, fold it up once. Once we parked our car, we didn't have to put it onto anything. Now, we paid for preferred parking each time, and this video is not about that, but it is 100% worth it to pay for preferred parking, because you are right up there, and we never had to then break the stroller down. We were really close. We could roll it right onto the monorail at the TTC when going to Magic Kingdom. Epcot, we could walk it right through. So we weren't loading a stroller up with everything we needed for the day and then having to break it down to fold that stroller up to hop on Disney transportation, which we've done before because we went to Disneyland a couple times with kids before, and breaking down a stroller and carrying it and getting everything on is a pain in the butt. The other detail that was really a big thing for us is that we had groceries delivered, which I believe you can do on property, but we had a full kitchen. So my family is vegan, but whether or not you're vegan, eating park food all day long is a lot and can affect us. So this way we could make sure that the kids had full breakfast, like a nice breakfast that they were used to eating. We could have oatmeal. We did make waffles one day. We had cereal, things that they could eat. And then we could worry about lunches and whatnot. We also had groceries like full bagels, a jar of peanut butter, things that we could bring right into the park so that they could eat lunches and have snacks like crazy. And running to the grocery store was very easy because we had a car. So we also were able to do that during our trip to make sure, one, to cut down on that food budget of spending in the park, so we could make sure that our kids had things that they could eat, that they would eat, but also that we spent our money on things like treats and snacks and meals for my husband and I. We also made sure we rented an Airbnb that had a washer and dryer, so we were able to pack less because we could reuse pieces, shorts, underwear, pajamas, things like that, t-shirts that maybe the kids wore. One of my girls loved her Moana dress. We washed it a couple times, so she was able to wear it at different parks. And that was a really great feature to have. And we were able to wash and dry everything. So when I got home, we had like very little laundry to do, which was so nice coming home from vacation. Was staying off property worth it? For my family, it was 100% worth it. We saved a ton of money from comparing staying in multiple rooms. We were able to have that night away. We were able to get recharged each night, have good food, and just have an overall good time. We did full days in the park with the baby napping in the stroller, and it worked great for our family. I know a lot of families like to return back to the hotel. However, some of those lines for the buses were just as long, and the Airbnb that we picked was actually a 10-minute drive to most of the parks. We might have been able to get there faster than if we were staying at one of the resorts like the All-Star resorts where you're on the bus for a long time. So that was actually worked out really well for us. Will we stay on property next time? It really depends on the ages of the kids, the stages. We would definitely stay on property if our kids were older, and we didn't need to worry so much about like that solid breakfast or the baby napping. but it really depends on looking at the different costs of things and where they are for the hotels. I hope this helps you decide whether or not you should stay on property or off property. Tell me in the comments, which way do you prefer? What are you going to do for your vacation? Are you going to stay on property or off? And if you have questions about staying off property or more things that I did not conclude in this video, I would love to answer them for you, because again, I did so much research on the combinations for my family. And maybe you're only staying with your family of 4, it still could be very applicable. The other thing that can apply is if you're staying with multiple families, cousins getting together, friends, having one big Airbnb was a great way to save money, to spend time together, to have the benefit of multiple adults in one space with the kids. Now with that, I leave you, have a magical trip, and I'll see you in the next video.